everyone, welcome back to A Speech a Week. I've just discovered a massive fly flying around my living room, which is not helpful. Never mind, we'll ignore that. Hopefully he won't make many appearances as we dive back into Hermione from A Winter's Tale. So if you're new here, my name is Pippa. I'm a professional actor and acting coach based in the UK. I trained at Bristol Old Vic Theatre School. I've worked in a bit of everything since graduation, and I started coaching because of COVID to help people get into drama schools and stuff, because that was still going on, and also help, normal jobbing actors get jobs and all that jazz, and improve their technique and everything like that. So that's what I do on my YouTube channel, and for this A Speech a Week project, I am diving into a classical text every week to explore it with you. This is a safe space. This is like a rehearsal zone. I'm not here to tell you how you should definitely interpret certain things, because everyone is different. And if anyone ever tells you that it's this way and you need to think of it this way, run a mile. It's really important to make sure that your interpretation and your understanding around classical text, Shakespeare, or indeed any text, any script that you're working on, resonates with you, because at the end of the day, you're the one performing it. And of course, what Shakespeare is saying does mean something in particular, but it's about finding that, and what makes it work for you is the way I describe it, which I don't think I've described very well, but hey ho. It's been a long morning thus far. So we are looking at Hermione this week from A Winter's Tale, Act 3, Scene 2. Last week we started this initial scene, and we're looking at Hermione's initial chunk from "Since what I am to say must be but that which contradicts my accusation." We went from there all the way down to "Cry fire upon my grave." We're going to carry on this week with the remainder, well, not the remainder because that'll be next week, but for the central chunk of her main speeches in this scene and in this play. And we're going to work through it together. I'm going to read it out loud so you can hear what she is actually saying at this point. And if you've got any questions or anything, the chat is enabled. So if you're watching live, you can just comment and join in the conversation. Hi, Ernest. Welcome back. Good to see you and have you. Just like Ernest, just like Ryden as well. Hello, everyone. Hey, Pip. Hiya. And if you're not watching this live, just comment below if you have any other questions. As I say, this is a safe space. Every actor has had training, and it's normal and okay to talk these things through. Hi, Rodney. Good morning. He's here. Welcome, everybody. Oh, thank you, Ryder. The neck is bad. I've got an injury. I was moaning about it on my Instagram yesterday. I think it's from cycling, because you always have to look over your shoulder. And I used to get it sometimes, like a bit of a repetitive strain where I'm looking over my shoulder, and because I'm on a racing bike as well, I'm pretty hips up, head down. Yeah, and because I haven't cycled too much long distance in a while, I think my ride on Monday has not helped the situation, along with my boxing class, which was brilliant, but I think it's just all caused it to tighten up. And now I look like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. But anyway, thanks for asking. I'm fine. We're fine. Let's talk about Hermione now and her neck, which is out on the line. Is that how you say it? So we're going to go from line 55. I mean, her speech kind of starts from line, I suppose, 58. "More than mistress of which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge." But we'll just rewind a little bit and go over what Leontes is saying here. So just rewinding on last week's session, Hermione's been thrust into court. Again, I'm not going to go too much into this, but she's been thrust on the stand in front of her husband, who is convinced she's been cheating on him, and had a bastard child by his friend at the court, and that she's been conspiring against him, which we know is not true. Well, I know is not true. Hermione is a very honourable character, a very strong woman, and she is the queen of Sicily, isn't it? Oh God, my brain. Cecilia. She is the queen. She was his queen. And this whole scene is just a delightful exploration of her composure and her stature and her humility and her love for him, despite being accused of all these terrible things by the one she loves. So her initial kind of monologue just to skim through it, though I don't really want to do that because it's very detailed. Go back and watch the video if you haven't. She's essentially saying, well, you all believe I'm guilty, so I guess that's the way I'm going to come across, despite what I'm saying. You, my lord, best know, even though you seem to not know right now, that my past life has been as true, as honest. I've had integrity from day one. Remember where I came from. I was your wife. I shared your bed. I'm the mother to a hopeful prince, the daughter of a great king. Hello, I wouldn't do this. It's her initial opening statement, and also her plea, not guilty. The initial chunk of this is her saying, I'm not guilty. Here's the evidence I can offer you on that. But then later on through that speech, she also kind of starts saying about how she doesn't want to live anymore. She would rather she didn't have to deal with that, but she's only standing for the honor of her children and her name, to clear her name for her children's sake. People often say Shakespeare's women are not strong. Excuse me, but this is absolute evidence that that is not the case. So yeah, she's arguing but not arguing. She knows it's kind of hopeless, but she's trying to clear her name. And then she says, if I have ever thought or actually acted on going against you and conspiring against you, then everyone who's listening, then turn your hearts to stone. And you, my nearest of kin, cry fire upon my grave. Be angry, be upset, all of that jazz. Leontes then says back, so coming into this now, he says, I ne'er heard yet that any these bolder vices wanted less impudence to gainsay what they did to perform it first. What? So let's revise that quickly, just to kind of skim over it. I ne'er heard yet, so ne'er, never. Sometimes Shakespeare put like a little apostrophe in and remove the syllables or the letter, creating multiple syllables in a word. I never heard yet that any of these bolder vices wanted less impudence to gainsay what they did than to perform it first. So just stew on that. Like, that's not an easy thing to break down in Shakespeare. Let me just quickly get my dictionary up. If you are new here, you will know that I implore you and encourage you to look this stuff up in a dictionary. Impudence isn't a word we use very often, so why would you just generally guess what it means? No, there's a reason why Leontes has said that specific word and not something else. So look it up, which is what I've just done. It takes 2 seconds with the magical internet that we have these days. The quality of being impudent or impertinence. Impertinence is the word I'm more familiar with. So cheek, audacity, temerity. Oh, love that word. So what's he saying there then? I never heard yet any of these bolder vices wanted less impudence, less cheek, less audacity to gainsay. Let's look up gainsay, and I'm also going to look up vices. And also, if you're watching this live now, if you think you have an idea of generally the gist of what he's saying, just say it, share it. Gainsay, deny or contradict. I had no idea that's what that meant. Now we know together. Speak against or oppose someone. So see how just by looking up 2 words that we're not overly familiar with, we're starting to branch out. I was thinking more like we're growing foliage around the branches of Shakespeare's words. So I never heard yet that any of these bolder vices wanted less impudence, cheek, audacity to contradict what they did than to perform it first. Is it starting to make sense now? Let me know what you're thinking, and let's look up vices as well. Something's bold, it's brash, it's out there, it's big, as well. So it's not just a vice, it's a bold vice. Immoral or wicked behavior. So that's really important as well, actually, because a vice to me, I always thought was like a bad habit. But a bad habit or something that is immoral behavior, those are 2 different things. A bad habit is picking your nose and biting your nails. Wicked, immoral behavior is rape, murder, conspiracy against your king, all that darker stuff. So again, do you see how looking up these words help us shape the weight of them in our mind's eye and figure out how we can make sense of them for a modern audience? And this is only 4 lines. It's not even that really, 3 if you put them together. See how much work we have to do, y'all? We're not going to go to this much depth for the rest of them, but I did want to look at this sentence that he says because it is confusing, and I think it's this sort of stuff that makes people go, I can't get Shakespeare, I don't get Shakespeare. But you can. Any thoughts on what that all means? I never heard yet that any of these bolder vices wanted less impudence to gainsay what they did than to perform it first. I've not heard yet that any of these bolder vices, so this immoral behavior, wanted less. So he's kind of personifying the immoral behavior here as well, the vices, wanted less impudence. So again, going back to impudence, because that's still a bit blurry in my mind's eye, let's go back to the dictionary definition. Impertinence. That's lovely. Effrontieri. Temerity, immodesty. They wanted less immodesty to contradict what they did than to perform it first. We're going to work this backwards now. So now it makes sense to me. He's never heard that these actions, this bad behavior, wanted less audacity to contradict the fact that they did them in the first place. Does that make sense? That's a very initial spitballing. Let's work it backwards. Than to perform it first. Performing it first is enough of a vice. This is where I'm kind of going with this. Let me know if this makes sense. It does in my brain. And really, if I was performing Leontes, that's all that kind of matters. As long as the other character understands it as well and the audience understands it. But if I get it, when I act it, it should come across. And even though you might not exactly know what word for word it means, just like with a piece of music, you don't know why the artist has put what where, you get the idea and the general gist, and also not even the general gist, but the specificity of why that word is where it is. Does that make sense? Let me know. So then to perform it first, performing these actions first, I've never heard of. I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but this is what I mean by work backwards and chop it up a little bit. I've never heard of this immoral behavior wanting, well, I keep wanting to say more because it says gainsay. Less, you're trying to undermine your actions and the audacity of those actions by contradicting them. And I've never heard of a bold vice wanting to do that rather than just admitting you've done it first. He's trying to get her to admit that she has done all of this stuff. This is my take on it as well, by the way. I've totally got a dead leg. I'm on the floor again. Hang on. Does any of this make sense? I feel like this is complicated, but I want to go into it with you and I want to see what everyone else is thinking or feeling. I never heard yet that any of these bold vices wanted less impudence to gainsay what they did than to perform it first. It's good, isn't it? Hermione then says, that's true enough, though 'tis a saying, sir, not due to me. So again, it's a saying, sir. This is probably something a bit more of the time. Ernest can't find exactly where we are. And Rodney said holographic ideas. Brilliant. Like that. So on line 50, so Act 3, Scene 2, line 54. After Hermione has just said, and my nearest of kin cry fire upon my grave, ! And this is something else to bear in mind. Leontes jumps in at the end of the line. So as you can see here, as soon as she says, cry fire upon my grave, 6 syllables, he comes in with the remaining 4 to complete the iambic pentameter. I ne'er heard yet. I ne'er heard yet. So it's not like there's a big pause. If it was a new line, there would be a pause there. You have permission to give it a I ne'er heard yet, but you don't. And it says, got it now. Right? It says, no, it makes sense. I'm just trying to reference it in today's event. And this is it. Do you see, like, it's kind of almost hard to articulate because Shakespeare's done it for us, but at the same time, we want to contemporize it because that's the way our brains work. So keep working on that and digging deep into figuring it out. But he's saying, I've never heard yet that any of these bolder vices wanted less impudence to gainsay what they did than to perform it first. I think, like I say, he's almost kind of saying, like, you're contradicting yourself, and you don't gain less audacity by doing that. There we go. I think that makes sense. I've never heard anyone expecting to have less audacity. Notice how I'm changing impudence for audacity. That word means something to me. I get that word. Audacity, impudence. They're not quite the same syllable matches, but still. By contradicting that you even did them first. He's saying, admit it. Don't contradict yourself because you're digging yourself a deeper grave, for want of a better ad-lib. Does that all make sense, everyone? Let me know. And expand on holographic ideas, Rodney. I think that's brilliant. I think I know what you're saying, but expand on that if you don't mind. Just this idea, because obviously Leontes is making all of this up. He's convinced she has done this. So he's kind of seeing holographic ideas, but also that's what I kind of took from what you said. But you tell me what else you meant. Brilliant, well done. So do you see how it takes work, right? We're 16 minutes in and we've done 3 lines. But once you've done that work, it helps you do the work quicker for the rest of Shakespeare's work. Then Hermione says, that's true enough, though 'tis a saying, sir, not due to me. Yeah, that's true. I've never heard it either. So again, very clever of Hermione. She's agreeing. And again, she's following on the line. So Leontes says, than to perform it first. That's true enough. Hermione's coming straight in. She's not thinking, oh, what should I say? How can I add a dramatic pause there? She isn't. She's going straight on. She's joining in and riding the wave that Leontes has started, just like he rode the wave of what she started with, cry fire upon my grave. That's true enough. Though 'tis a saying, sir, there's some respect there still, or is it sarcastic? Up for you as the actor. Not due to me. I don't abide by that. So, yeah, I agree with you. It's not relevant here. And then Leontes, straight enough, says, you will not own it. You are denying it. You're in denial, for want of a translation. Though it is a saying, sir, not due to me, 10 lines, then he says, you will not own it. She comes straight in, more than mistress of, and then we're going to go into this. This is the main chunk I wanted to talk about. You will not own it. He won't own the fact that she is innocent, for God's sake. So brilliant, isn't it? In that tiny little duologue that we've got there, so much is said. I never heard yet that any of these bolder vices wanted less impudence to gainsay what they did than to perform it first. That's true enough, though 'tis a saying, sir, not due to me. You will not own it. More than mistress of la 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 la. Isn't it brilliant? This is a quarrel between husband and wife. Put in the court and everything aside. This is a disagreement between a partnership and a relationship. And a true one at that. What was a true one? Oh, it's so good. Such an important line, says Rodney. Isn't it just? You will not own it. It says so much about him that he can't process her innocence at this point. It's so good. And it says, how can you answer you are in denial? If you say you are not, then you are in denial. An unfair argumentative style. Again, and I think Leontes is illogical at this point. He's just paranoid and corrupted, I think. I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to have a really quick bite of a little sandwich. I thought I'd have time to eat it before I began, but I didn't. So now it's there getting stale. I've got vegan ham with some dairy-free cheese, bit of vegan butter, and mustard, and some nice bread from Marks and Spencer's. Fancy that. Bougie. And now we're going to get onto the chunk, which I'm going to read through once I've eaten my sandwich. And we're going to... We'll see how we go. I'll see if we can get onto Leontes' bit, but obviously we're 20 minutes in and we've only done a tiny little chunk. So let's see how we go. But I'll sight read this for you. I have not read this today. It might come out clunky and really rubbish. Who knows? But that's what we're here for. This is rehearsal. There's my fridge. And that's what we're here for. Rodney says, it is as if Othello, Desdemona argument was in public court. Definitely. Brilliant. And I think Shakespeare often does have true, almost with Brutus and Portia as well in Caesar, they're not really arguing. She's really imploring him to open up to her. But he does do, he knows the truth of what it's like to argue with your missus. He does it brilliantly well. And your friends, you know. He even though it's written hundreds of years ago, like these arguments would have happened. It's so brilliant. It's so brilliant. But exactly, as well, Rodney, you could change Leontes to Othello and Hermione to Desdemona, and this would fit in part of like an unseen scene that could be added in, 100%. 100%. It's the EastEnders stuff, isn't it? So let's go through it. This is Hermione's retort to "You will not own it" from Leontes. "More than mistress of which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. For Polixenes, with who I'm accused, I do confess I loved him as in honour he required, with such a kind of love as might become a lady like me. With a love, even such, so and no other as yourself commanded. Which not to have done, I think had been in me both disobedience and ingratitude to you, and toward your friend, whose love had spoke even since it could speak from an infant, freely, that it was yours. Now for conspiracy. I know not how it tastes, though it be dished for me to try how. All I know of it is that Camillo was an honest man, and why he left your court the gods themselves, wotting no more than I, are ignorant. Leontes then says, you knew of his departure, as you know what you have undertaken to do in's absence. Sir, you speak a language that I understand not. My life stands in the level of your dreams, which I'll lay down. Leontes then says, your actions are my dreams. You had a bastard by Polixenes, and I but dreamed it. As you were past all shame, those of your fact are so past all truth, which to deny concerns more than avails, for as thy brat hath been cast out, like to itself, no farther owning it, which is indeed more criminal in thee than it. So thou shalt feel our justice, in whose easiest passage look for no less than death. Sir, spare your threats. And then Hermione goes on to that fantastic chunk there. Oh, so I think we will get on to Leontes' section, but we'll see how we go. What are we thinking? First thoughts? Feelings? Was there anything she or he said that made you kind of go, oosh, like that bit? If there is, let it stick out. Think of it. Why did that stand out to you? And let that be part of your journey with these characters. I liked the alliteration of more than mistress of, which comes to me in name of fault. I must not. I like the M's there. There was lots of lovely and at all acknowledge. At all acknowledge. There was like 3 A's alliteration there, and I like that. At all acknowledge. At all I enjoyed that personally for me. One bit I love as well, where I was working on this the other week, is the with such a kind of love as might become a lady like me, with a love, even such, so and no other. This again, the specificity she's being there. She's really laying it on thick. And I compartmentalize every time I say that bit. I visualize, with a love, the love that fits in this box, so and no other, like nothing outside of this box, Leontes. She's really being specific here. It's not just general chit chat. And I think often with Shakespeare, we try and rattle through it if we don't quite get it. But every little detail is in there for a reason. Your character is saying it so specifically and with intent. Ryden says he seems pretty convinced of his accusations. In the open air, I don't get it. Oh, we're not at that bit yet, but I can talk to you about that, Ryden. In the open air. Essentially, it's a way to cut syllables, like I talked about earlier. But that's in the next chunk, which we shall not look at today. We'll look at that next week. I think, unless I'm being really, it's later on, isn't it? So those are bits that stood out for me. And whatting no more than I. What the hell does that mean? That's a weird word. Whatting. I think of swatting and wanting. So again, if there's a word that is foreign to you, don't just think, I don't get it, quickly look it up. Have a little play and think, what could it mean? What are my instincts as an actor telling me that could mean? And then look it up. And then see what relevance it has and your instincts have. Because trust me, you'll find that your instincts usually are leaning in the right direction. I think anyway. And if they're not, you can train them to do that. Ernest says, she doesn't respond viscerally. She is reserved and calm. Yes, we talked about this last week as well, didn't we? She holds her dignity while enduring the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune of the wrongly accused. She is a pond with deep waters. I don't know why that's really tickled me. She's a pond. Oh, she's a pond with deep waters. I think that's hilarious. I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but I know what you're saying. She has depth. For sure. A nice use of Hamlet there. It's outrageous. The slings and arrows of outrageous. It is outrageous fortune, isn't it? Yeah. Nice use of Hamlet there. Yes, very much so, says Ernest. And Ryden says, ooh, okay. Brilliant. So let's translate it then. So we've just had Leontes say, you will not own it. Hermione retorts, more than mistress of which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. Again, it's not I must not acknowledge, at all acknowledge. I must not acknowledge. So we know what that bit kind of means, right? If you refuse to acknowledge something, you don't acknowledge it. I often use actions as well. You ignore. I will not acknowledge the fault that I have done, because she knows she hasn't done any fault. But then rewinding a little bit more to go back to the beginning bit, because that's a bit more unusual. More than mistress of, which comes, and I keep stressing of, more than, you will not own it. More than mistress of, which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. Which comes to me in name of fault, I must not. We've got an 11 there. Do you see how I got a bit confused with the rhythm? So we've got an 11 there. So often when Shakespeare, this is something we haven't talked about in a while, because I try not to delve onto iambic pentameter too much, because I know that is taught and most people get the gist of that. But the premise of iambic pentameter is that there are 10 syllables per line in Shakespeare's work. However, not every line is 10 syllables. Sometimes there'll be 9, 8, 6, 12, 11, just like we've got here. So you will not own it. More than mistress of is 10. But the second line is 11, if I've counted correctly, which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. And there's that enjambment on both of those lines there. So when he puts more or less in, it's normally an indication of a untidiness and unsettling and uprooting of something. And I think it's getting uglier at this point. In the first speech that she does, a lot of it is very in iambic pentameter. But now we're starting to unsettle a little bit more. So, and this is another reason why, if you ever hear anyone say, "Oh, stick to the iambic pentameter and the stresses," you can't always, because Shakespeare doesn't always abide by that himself. So think about it. Why is it that Shakespeare's done that in your mind's eye? If you were playing Hermione and had to say this line, why is it the rhythm isn't beautifully rhythmic at this point? Is she unsettling? Is she getting it? Is there a bit more frustration that comes through that she has to rein in? Why there's a full stop after at all acknowledge? Play with it. There's a reason. It's up to you to determine that, because we don't have Shakespeare right here to ask that question. Ernest says, but he could have got to 10 without issue. Yes, why? Exactly. First thing, he genuinely might have been rushing and couldn't be asked. Like, the turnaround for these plays was fast and he had to work quickly, usually. Second thing is, again, he thought, no, I don't want it to feel good here. It isn't like a beautiful relationship or a lovely romantic scene where everything is springs and roses. It's getting darker. How can I interrupt the pleasurable rhythm that you are hearing in most of the other language and the other characters' descriptions and conversations? Bryden says, so beats. I did notice this last week, but it's quite erratic and spread out, which is neat. Exactly. Repeated use of here seems to be a label game. He wants her to own the label. She immediately removes it. Interesting. Ernest says, or could it be we are reading meaning to a typesetter oversight? That's another thing. Yeah, the people that were printing that fly is enormous. The people that were printing this stuff to begin with were probably illiterate themselves. So remember, again, there's so many things that could be at play here. And also, the modern day editors might be changing things around and deciding that. When we did the A Sonnet a Day project, there were moments where I think different versions said different things, but it was quite clear that some editors had a preference of something, and they'll put that in because it's their version. So if they can make up their own version, why the hell can't you? That's what I'm going to say to that. So let's think of that. Why has she got 11 syllables there? More than mistress of, which comes to me in name of fault. And again, of, which comes to me in name of fault. Fault is a good word. I must not at all acknowledge. So I think what she's saying there, for me, working backwards, that the name that is guilty at fault here is more than the mistress that I am. Does that make sense? Does that resonate with you? More than mistress of, which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. And there I think the rhythm comes back in. I must not. It's not I must at all acknowledge. I must not at all acknowledge. That's my natural inclination with Shakespeare, to ride that rhythm out. If that makes sense, to ride that rhythm out. That makes more sense to me. That's how I say it. She's stressing that I will not at all acknowledge this thing. You see? More than mistress of, just going back to Rodney's point, of. More than mistress of, which comes... I know what you're saying there, Rodney. More than mistress of all this calamity. Well, I think I know what you're saying. Forgive me if I'm not. More than mistress of, which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. I feel like there are kind of three chunks there, actually. The rest of this speech, I think, is a little bit more crystal clear, but I do think these bits, I'm stressing on them because I want us to get to the gritty bitty stuff of it. More than mistress of, and it's more than mistress of, which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. I'm okay. My name is being condemned at fault here, but I'm more than mistress of that. That's what it is, I think. I'm more than mistress of, which comes to me in name of fault. I must not at all acknowledge. Her name is at fault here. More than mistress of, which comes to me by name, in name of fault. I must not at all acknowledge. More than mistress of, which comes to me in name of fault. I must not. As the mistress that she is, and again, mistress as well, I think we often think mistress is like a slutty like bit on the side. If someone was a mistress back in those days, it had that saucy connotation as well, I think, but also it did just mean, in fact, let's look it up, like someone of the house, like an important woman. Let's just double check. I think we've had this conversation as well. A woman in position of authority and control. Interesting, isn't it, that is also condemned as a lover, a bit on the side. A courtesan, a prostitute. Ridiculous, isn't it? There's so many silly little ways that societies try to undermine women having power or control. And there's one. So again, more than mistress of, which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. I need to be more powerful here and stand up and say, I do not acknowledge this because my name is at fault. It's more than that. It isn't to try and get off the hook. I'm stepping up. This all makes sense in my mind. So again, this is just my way of working it. If it doesn't for you, please ask and we can dive a little deeper. There's some more things here. Rodney says, imagine a WH play at printing where the typesetter is missing a letter and has to cope with on the fly. He chooses the context, playing field, pitch, and she then rejects. Yeah. Definitely. Although I think she doesn't quite reject. I think she runs with it, saying, yeah, more, I need to not own it more because my name is at fault. So I will not acknowledge it. Do you know what I mean? More than mistress of, which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. I must not own it. It's more than me. And again, she doesn't say more than, she's saying it about her, but more than mistress of. It's not more than Hermione of, it's mistress. I think she's talking on behalf of women here. I think there is so much, and I think Shakespeare does this so much. And later on, there's a reason why he's put in the scene, enter Hermione as to her trial, Paulina and ladies. Remember sexual double standards, like I've just highlighted, the definition of mistress actually traditionally means a woman of authority and power, and yet there's also this tremendously undermining definition of mistress, which is, the slutty lover. It's insane. So she's got Paulina, and we'll look at Paulina at some point because there's a brilliant speech in this scene as well from her. There's more to the women here, and I think she's saying that. And she's just given birth to a daughter, So let's leave that there, otherwise we will be there all day. But Ronnie says, good point. Good point. Ernest says, that's a tough sentence to unpack. It is, isn't it? Because it's not quite out. But they're not all like that. It's just those ones, I think, give Shakespeare a bad reputation and make people close their minds to him. Can't think an audience be able to ponder it during performance. Exactly. The confusion would just pass. Well, and that's it. I think also, if you're in the moment and really watching what's going on, the confusion wouldn't really be there at all. The confusion arises when you start prodding too much. Whereas if you actually, like I say, with a piece of music, sit back and observe it. For example, as she's saying that, the women could be nodding and agreeing with her. She has to deny it, Leontes, because she's innocent. How can you not see Hermione is doing that? Would inform you as the audience. This is where good direction and good ensemble actors help paint the picture as much as the main ones. You'd understand more of that. And same if Leontes was like, while she was saying it, or doing something like that. It would help you understand what's going on. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Or this is an Easter egg for us to find upon deep examination. Subtle are at many levels. Exactly. And Shakespeare does that often. There's some brilliant things that he does that, you know, at surface level, they mean what it means. But actually, if you go deeper, for example, going back to Hamlet, there's a bit where he says something about country. And obviously, C-U-N-T word, which is an awful word, that, you know, sometimes actors pluck that out of the word country more because he's talking about a woman or whatever. Like, there's so many little things that you can pluck in and put in and take out and readjust to make it your own, which is, again, why Shakespeare lives on and why we're even looking at him today. Rodney says that sentence is where it is acted body language that may be the immediate impression for the audience. Holographic. I see what you're saying. Right, exactly. So although you might not understand the words, the way, the body language, the intonation, the emphasis on certain words is going to help you understand it. For example, more than mistress of, so this is the 5th time I've said it, but you'll notice I'm plucking out different words that make sense to me to understand what she's saying here. More than mistress of, which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. More, the mistress that is accused of in name at fault, I must not acknowledge. The fault, I must not acknowledge. Do you see how I'm plucking out mostly and more the mistress of? More. I'm going to do more to not acknowledge my fault. See what I'm saying? So it's down to the actor to find a way to make it work and pluck out what needs to be plucked out to get the audience to understand it. It's bigger than mistress. It's bigger than me, the mistress whose name is accused of fault, adultery, crimes committed, that I must not acknowledge this because I'm innocent. But she didn't say that. Moving on, let's carry on. For Polixenes, with whom I am accused. And then she changes tactic here and brings him back into the mix. She's already mentioned him before, but now she comes up again. For Polixenes, with whom I am accused, for him, who I'm accused of sleeping with, conspiring with, yada, yada, I do confess. So this is lovely as well. It's like when you confess something, it's something that needs to be taken out, right? And if you're in a court of law and you say, I confess, people are going to be like, oh, she's going to admit she did it. But she doesn't. I think it's very cleverly, she's being very clever to get them to listen to her again. For Polixenes, with whom I am accused, I do confess I loved him as in honor he required. I loved him as was required of me at the level of his honor. I loved him at the level of his honor, his duty, his name, his stature required me to. I loved him the right amount, up to, keep doing this, up to that point. I loved him as in honor he required. But she gets even more specific. She doesn't leave it there. She reiterates it numerous times. With such a, and not even reiterate it again, because Shakespeare never gives you the same thought twice. She gets more specific with that love. I loved him as in honor he required, with such a kind of love, because there's not just one type of love, is there? The love you have for your dog is very different to the love you have for your mum or your grandson or, you know, your manager at work who's just brilliant and a really good friend. You just love them. They're all very different kinds of love. There is no one singular strain of love. So she's being even more specific. With such a kind of love as might become a lady like me. Let's look up become, actually, because that's definitely in something else that we've looked at recently. In particular, Phoebe, and yeah, it becomes him. Begin to be, look good on or suit. So again, looking for similar words here. It says enhance, embellish, grace, look right on, suit. So with such a kind of love that might suit a lady like me, my position, the queen, your friend, oh, sorry, his friend, your wife, because you, and she goes on to say, like, you've spoke so highly of him. Of course I'm going to love him, because if I didn't, it would have been disobedient and ungrateful, which is something she comes on to later. But again, she's being so specific with such a kind of love that might become a lady like me. A love, even such, as she goes on, sorry, with a love, even such, so, and no other. Like, she's really, really being specific. It's so good, isn't it? Fangirl with me, if you will. As yourself commanded. And also, interestingly enough, when someone commands you love something, we know that's not how love works, is it? But she adhered to his commanding. So she says she's basically saying, I did what I was told. And it was fitting of me to love that person in that amount, in that kind of way, because that's what you commanded of me. She is a loyal servant to her husband and her king. She's reiterating all of this. Of course, he's not budging. He's not said anything yet. And remember as well, there may be a reason why she's having to reiterate this. A love, even such, so, and no other, as you yourself commanded, because he's maybe trying to interrupt her. Who knows? And again, this is going to add to that storytelling element that we were talking about earlier. It depends what, the whole picture is going to help paint the understanding of the scene. Yeah, just like you said, Rodney. And you said, she says way too many innocent women like her get the false accusation. That's what I've only just seen that note. Yeah, I think that's what she's maybe saying here. It's bigger than me. And also, like I said, she's just given birth to a daughter. So I can imagine, and this is something like, as a woman, like, I don't have children, but if I ever did have children, when we have children, if I had a girl, there would be that element of fear that they're going to have to go through, like what I've gone through, what I know so many other women have gone through in terms of, just the crap that women have to deal with. And of course, it's not just women, it's men as well. It's all this sort of stuff, but from that perspective. And so I think as well, her touching on, tis a derivative from me to mine, and only that I stand for. I feel like there is that, combined with the women behind her, the badass women behind her, there is more of an element of, I have to do this for the greater good, And I think, again, it's a subtle thing, and that's something that I've put on it and I think of. But I do think maybe that's what she's saying here at the beginning. Referred to prior before getting more specific statement. Yeah. Gotcha. Ryden says, wow. Very good. And also notice we've got no full stops yet in my edition anyway. So for Polixenes, that first chunk is a statement. More than mistress of which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. Full stop. Then there's a choice to go on. She has the floor. They don't interrupt her, whatever. Who knows what that is? For Polixenes, she brings it back to him. So actually that also does, in my mind's eye, embellish the idea that she's standing up for all women in that first statement. And in the next bit, she's bringing it back to this singular man who has had such an impact on her husband, her life, her children's lives, her reputation, to reiterate, not reiterate, I've said that so many times already, but to bring it back to who is wrong, who has fudged up for everyone. Yeah? Yes! Ronnie says, yes! 2 exclamation marks. And then it runs on. So as I was saying, we've got that statement with a full stop, and then it goes on. In my edition, at least, I don't get a full stop until 10 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh my God. So we've got 11 lines where she's not necessarily not breathing, because there's semicolons and commas galore, but you've got to use them. Shakespeare put them in there so you can actually breathe to then start the speaking process. Without a breath in, you cannot breathe out and talk. Our vocal folds literally are tiny little muscles that need air to go through them to make a sound. So if you haven't got that breath supporting you, you're buggered. So use the punctuation. So I'm going to read that whole chunk all the way through to the next full stop. For Polixenes, with whom I am accused, I do confess I loved him as in honour he required, with such a kind of love as might become a lady like me, with a love even such, so and no other, as yourself commanded, which not to have done, I think had been in me both disobedience and ingratitude to you and toward your friend, whose love had spoke, even since it could speak, from an infant, freely, that it was yours. That was me reading, breathing when the punctuation told me to. And tell me now, did that help the storytelling? Yes, it did. I took a breath when was needed and the thoughts were landing. Oh, the fly was on my sandwich. No! So, I had this with a student last week. I don't know if you're going to watch this back, my love. But the punctuation will never hinder you. It will never stop you. It should never get in the way or restrict you. These are all things I've heard as an acting coach. It's there to help you get the story and the meaning through. So let me just do another quick example of not acknowledging the punctuation. Let me just do what I feel like doing. For Polixenes, with whom I am accused, I do confess I loved him as such in honour he required, with such a kind of love as might become a lady like me, with a love even such so and no other, as yourself commanded, which not to have done, I think had been in me both disobedience and ingratitude. Do you see how that is breaking it up and making it more about me, making it look improvised than actually the truth of the language and the breath? It's genius, isn't it? Genius. So, for Polixenes, with whom I'm accused, la la la. So where did we get to? As yourself commanded. And then we got a semicolon, which not to have done, which if I hadn't have done, which if I didn't do, I think had been in me. And again, I think, not you think. She's bringing it back to herself because this is Hermione's true nature. I would have thought I was behaving disobediently and with ingratitude to you and toward your friend, whose love had spoke, even since it could speak, from an infant. That was a mouthful. Do you see what I'm saying? Isn't it massive and brilliant? I think had been in me both disobedience, and again, it's not just disobedience, so it's both disobedience, which not to have done, I think had been in me, another 11, both disobedience, which is why I'm stressing both, even though it's at the beginning of a sentence, and traditionally with the iambic, it's the second, the fourth, the sixth, the eighth, the 10th that we thrust on more. I wouldn't do that. I'd say both disobedience and ingratitude. It's not obedience and gratitude. It's disobedience and ingratitude. Those lovely little letters transform the meaning of these words. So make sure you pluck them out. Ernest, the long sentence make me think she can't get these thoughts out soon enough. Again, belies her innocence. Definitely, Ernest. And that's where I think the semicolons come in. I think the commas are her taking a breath, trying to think how to articulate it. But then the semicolons prompt her, which is further evidence. And on top of that, which we've talked about again before. So, for example, there's a semicolon after required and a semicolon after commanded. So let's just have a little bit of an acting workshop on this bit. For Polixenes, with whom I am accused, I do confess I loved him as in honour he required, with such a kind of love as might become a lady like me, with a love even such, so and no other, as yourself commanded, which not to have done. Do you see how I'm using that to kind of, it's a gear change. And there's another one I missed a lady like me, with such a kind of love. I always get that bit wrong. With a love even such. It's tricky, that bit. It's tricky, but it's brilliant. So yeah, do you see the gear changes that I was trying to demonstrate there? She makes it clear that her husband is second guessing her actual self. Exactly. So again, it's so brilliantly done, isn't it? Which I think, is that what she says? Which, I think? Where is it? Oh, I've lost it now. Not which not to have done, I think had been in me both disobedience. I know that that would have been me disobeying, and I don't do that. So good. The run-on sentence works well, exactly, and that's the indication of where the pace should change. When I did the version where I was ignoring the punctuation, you get all this stupid stuff where it's like you're trying to improvise it. Polixenes with whom I accuse, I do confess. I loved him as in honor he required. Like you start to embellish it with stuff that doesn't need to be there. I saw a lot of this recently at a show that I saw last week. I felt it was a bit like that. There wasn't much adherence of that, and it made it seem and feel a little bit too drawn out. And but the punctuation gives you the gear shifts and the changes that you need, especially when it's not in verse. So there you have it. Run-on sentence works well. Yes, real stream of thought, real run-on life. Yeah, and we do it all the time. Yeah. Oh yeah, and like that other thing. Oh, and that time we did that. Yeah, do you remember? You know, we do it all the time. For me, that's a semicolon. Shakespeare sometimes doesn't follow proper writing rules. He defines them. Yes, he does. He is like a test pilot taking the equipment to new heights and speeds. Exactly. Yes, experimenting. At the same time, we don't behave with punctuation the way we should do now. Like you'll see all these modern playwrights not putting capital letters where a capital letter belongs and not having any punctuation. And I get it, that's an experimentation, but at the same time, it kind of contradicts the idea that punctuation should be there in the first place. Like it and can be used as a literary device to help tell the story. It kind of undermines that. And again, I think this is a reason why so many young folk don't get Shakespeare, is because they're not used to using punctuation properly and understanding how it all works. Not through want of, lack of education or anything, but well, it is a lack of, not like a lack of education, but lack of people explaining that they're the guidelines that can be experimented with, but at the same time, you've got to know that before you can experiment with them. It's all very well and good being like, oh, what happens if I put that with that? But if you don't know what that is on its own, and that is on its own, you're not going to know. I feel like we got a bit philosophical there. But it's like what I say with acting. I said this to a student the other day. It blew his mind, actually. He said, I said, like, you've got to do the work on yourself. Like, you've got to know who you are as a person and what makes you tick and who you are in order, and have those difficult conversations with yourself so that you can have them with your characters. Otherwise, the lines blur. You don't know what's right. You don't know, like, it gets too murky. So that's what I'm trying to say here. If you know what a full stop does and what a colon does and a comma does, you can then choose to have it or not have it, because you understand the, not rules, but understand the guidelines. If you don't know what they are and you just don't put them in anyway, like, you could be hindering yourself and it's all just a mess. So anyway, I've always liked Table for Sale by Women with Wooden Legs. Who has the wooden legs? Women or exactly. I followed a great Instagram page recently that plucks out all of these brilliant things. And I'm not perfect. Oh my gosh, I've written many a sentence that actually probably doesn't quite make sense. But Shakespeare kind of hasn't. He kind of knows what he's doing, so trust him. Reminds me of my wife's college thesis, A History of the Comma. Oh my God, send it to me. Send it to me, Rodney. If she's still got it, if she's got a digital format, I'd love to read that. It's so important. Moving on, back to the text then. Which not to have done, I think had been in me both disobedience and ingratitude to you and toward your friend. And also, there's no comma there. So I would naturally be like, to you and toward your friend. But actually, there's no comma there. So she's grouping them together, which again, I think is a lovely, subtle way of saying you're in the same freaking ballpark as this Polixenes prat, buddy. To you and to your friend. You were, from the perspective of the court, you're in the same ballpark of being as much of a psychopath, idiot, horrible person as Polixenes, but also it reiterates what she's about to say. I keep saying reiterate. It's not a rehashing of the same thing. I need to be mindful of my language there. She's defining it differently. It's an iteration, a fresh iteration, even though that's what reiterate means, isn't it? But I think we think it's just the same thing, but it's not. It's a fresh taking of it. It also iterates that they were one, like that lovely bit in Helena in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Like two cherries seeming parted but connected, like all that sort of imagery. We warbled as one. She's highlighting the unity of Leontes with Polixenes here to help her get across that she loved him as she was supposed to. So yeah, to you and toward your friend whose love had spoke, even since it could speak from an infant, freely, subliminal messaging here maybe, freely that it was yours. You spoke freely that you loved him. She never did. She did what she was told. She loved him as in honor he required. She loved him with such a kind of love as he commanded. However, so that's a contradiction, not a contradiction, but she's iterating that her love was commanded of her. So why the hell would she sleep with him and have a bastard child with him? Whilst Leontes' love towards Polixenes was freely, since you were born, spoken of. So she's picking away and contradicting him here. Or not contradicting him, but contradicting his past life, saying how good he was, how lovely he was. You've loved him since birth. And yet she only just met him frickin' however long ago, did what she was told in order to respect him as she was told and love him as she was meant to. And now all of a sudden, oh, I did love him and I hated you, the love of my life, the king. So good. And then we get the full stop. So there could be, I think at this point, there could be a little bit more frustration here. And actually, just looking at that second bit where she starts saying about how it was disobedience and ingratitude, and that Leontes had spoken of his love freely all this time, I do think there's a bit more frustration there, actually, because she's literally like, I've done what I was told, and yet here I stand being condemned for things that are fiction. Which then makes the whole gear change semicolon thing make more sense to me, because it is a bit more, there's not that many of them in the first chunk that she does at the beginning that we looked at last week. There is more of them here. So I do think there is this element of maybe racing ahead a little. So yeah. And then I love how she brings it back after that. It was yours. Now for conspiracy. So that's the love thing I've ticked off. She's kind of compartmentalizing. Brilliant. Rodney says, is she building a little anger about stupid men idea? Interesting. I'm glad you said that, because perhaps, like we said from that first statement, it's bigger than me here. I'm highlighting the issues that go on here. Women do as we're freaking told, and then we're slandered for it afterwards. There's always this contradiction. Definitely, that could be part of it. And that's it. There's no, we're so complex as human beings. There is no black and white. There isn't specifically what she's saying, but what is triggering that could be an element of, my dad did the same thing to my mum. Look at me standing here. You told me this, that you loved him, blah, blah, blah. That other guy, I saw one of my waiting women told me that something like this happened to her before. Do you know what I mean? There could be all of these things that you need to do as an actor, as a back work, to arm you when you release the bullet of the word. That's good, isn't it? That's good. I'm going to treat myself with a bite of my sandwich for saying that. You got to do the back work to arm yourself with the bullet that is the word. I'll figure out a better way to articulate that. So, now for conspiracy. As I was saying, yeah, and it's, well, actually, I probably shouldn't be using the gun analogy at the moment, but yeah, she has 2 more barrels to fire at him. She's starting to go, okay, tick that bit, tick that bit, tick that bit. For love, that's the situation, buddy. You loved him freely since you were a kid. I did what I was told. For conspiracy, conspiring against you, treason, hoping that you'd be dead, whatever she's being accused of, that the guy says at the beginning. You aren't here accused and arraigned of high treason in committing adultery with Polixenes. So by committing this adulterous act that never happened, God, if they had DNA testing back then, there'd have been no drama, would there? Now for conspiracy, the part where I'm conspiring against you, I know not how it tastes, though it be dished for me to try how. There is so much weight in these words now, and I really want to tuck into this because it's really important. But yeah, and it says a pivot. Yes, she has the floor, Ernest, strong and smart in both. Exactly. She's got the composure. She knows what she's doing. She says, and for me, this is what I took on my initial reading of this. Now for conspiracy, I know not how it tastes. So I don't know how it tastes, though it be dished for me to try how. I think she's making reference there that people have offered it to her before. It's been dished for me to taste this, to conspire against you. And every time I've said no, I have not tasted it. And again, taste is the initial part of digestion, isn't it? If something tastes good, you're more likely to consume more of it. So again, it's a lovely, well-written sentence. I love it. Now for conspiracy. I know not how it tastes, though it be dished for me to try how. All I know of it, and this is it, all I know of it is that Camillo was an honest man, and why he left your court, the gods themselves, wotting no more than I, are ignorant. So she brings up Camillo here, and she's saying, this is all I know. She's being very blunt and simple here. And again, with the punctuation, all I know of it is that Camillo was an honest man. We've got the 10 syllables again. And why he left your court, the gods themselves. And why he left your court, the gods themselves. 10 syllables again. She's galloping into a truthful. So you could argue that maybe when she's speaking truthful and directly, or not directly, it's all direct, but really iterating her point here, it's in that rhythm. Wotting no more than I are ignorant. Wotting no more than I are ignorant. 10 again. Must run. Brilliant stuff. Off you go, Rodney. Good to see you. Thank you so much. We're going to leave it here because we'll be too long and my sandwich is getting stale. We're at 1. Oh my goodness. So wotting, that's what I want to quickly talk on. Wotting. No. So the version that I did recently was actually translated to knowing. And I do think that was a good thing to change it to. So again, sometimes editions or people's edits will change to something else to make it more understandable for a modern audience. So all I know of it is that Camillo was an honest man, and why he left your court, why he left, and again, court, it was more like a unit, like the royal family. Why he left your family, your tribe, the gods themselves, coming back to gods now again, knowing no more than I, are ignorant. We are ignorant. Great. So let's have a quick read through of that chunk again, and let's see what happens. So this is Hermione. Leontes has just said, you will not own it. Hermione says, more than mistress of which comes to me in name of fault, I must not at all acknowledge. For Polixenes, with whom I am accused, I do confess I loved him as in honour he required, with such a kind of love as might become a lady like me. With a love even such, so and no other, as you yourself commanded, which not to have done, I think had been in me both disobedience and ingratitude to you and toward your friend, whose love had spoke, even since it could speak, from an infant, freely, that it was yours. Now for conspiracy, I know not how it tastes, though it be dished for me to try how. All I know of it is that Camillo was an honest man, and why he left your court the gods themselves, wotting no more than I, are ignorant. It's crystal clear, isn't it? Crystal clear. So yes, Ryden, wotting. So look up wotting. If that doesn't come up, look up what. Look up the Latin origins of the words, but it's knowing. If you what something, which also, if you think about what does wotting mean, what reminds me of, I said earlier, didn't I, swat. And because there's a fly around, you swat a fly, but also a swat is a very knowledgeable person, isn't it? SWOT. So although we don't know what wotting or what is, think of what other words that I do know have that word in it. For example, swat, you're such a swat. Or, oh, he's such a geek, total swat. It makes sense, right? And then you'll start, again, to be able to piece the pieces clearer so that when you approach another play or another character in Shakespeare or any language, any word, even if you're learning a different language, like Spanish or whatever, there's often the root. A lot of these roots come back together and it all helps. It all really, really helps. So there you go. That was Hermione. What we're going to do then is carry on with that scene and get to the end. Well, not the end, but we're going to get to Apollo Be My Judge next week, which is the end of her famous Sir, spare your threats, the bug which you would frighten me with I seek speech. And I've really enjoyed that. This is such a great play and such a great scene. Such great writing. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, if you are watching this back, do let me know below. Really good to see you, Ernest. Thank you so much for joining, and Rodney and Ryden and everyone else who came on. I saw a few more people were on as well. Oh, good luck with the yard work. Oh, glad I'm not you doing that. Have a lovely rest of your day. I'm gonna go eat my sandwich now, just to share with you. Doesn't it look delightful? Ah. I'll see you next week for the next A Speech a Week. And I will be dropping a newsletter, hopefully later. Still manually adding in all my emails. I've got so many more than I thought. It's amazing. For my newsletter, I've been writing it out and editing it. It will be out either today or tomorrow. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Lots of love. Goodbye. And yes, it does, Ryden. It really does. Well done. See you soon. Bye, everyone. So weird.